Once again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lavanya Katyal, and I warmly welcome you all to our session for the day on solar energy, diversification of the global value chain, and EU-India cooperation in the area of manufacturing, co-organized by the European Commission and the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Welcome once again to everyone, and this event has been organized in close cooperation with the Confederation of Indian Industry and Solar Power Europe. Before we start our session for the day, I would take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed dignitaries for the day. A huge round of applause for our esteemed guests, please. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Ms. Kadri Simson, Her Excellency Ms. Kadri Simson, to the stage, please. Just by the way of introducing her, I would like to thank you very much for joining us today. She's the European Commissioner for Energy, and we thank you again, ma'am, for gracing the presence of your occasion at the occasion. Thank you. Please join us on the stage, ma'am. Thank you. Now, I would also like to cordially welcome His Excellency Shri Bhagwanth Khuba, the Minister of State for Renewable Energy and Chemical and Fertilizer, Government of India. Sir, very warm welcome from our side. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Sameer Gupta, Chairman, CII Atmanirbhar Bharat, RE Manufacturing and Chairman, Managing Director for Jackson Group. Sir, please. Now I would like to invite Mr. Sameer Gupta to kindly deliver the welcome remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. His Excellency Shri Bhagwanth Khuba ji, Minister of State for New and Renewable Energy, Chemical and Fertilizers, Government of India. Her Excellency Ms. Kadri Simson, European Commissioner for Energy, dignitaries, speakers, participants, and members of media. I wish to extend a very warm welcome to all of you on my behalf and on behalf of CII. Special thanks to His Excellency Shri Bhagwanth Khuba ji and Her Excellency Ms. Kadri Simson for sparing their valuable time. I think COVID-19 was a humbling moment that brought the collective might and power of all nations of the world to a standstill. I believe biggest beneficiary of COVID is the push to climate change movement, as leaders globally are committed to carbon neutrality. There is clearly consensus on two things. One is that we need to adopt renewable energy, and B, we need to have shock-resilient supply chain infrastructure across the world. While we may say that this pandemic has reached stage of endemic, clearly a lot needs to be done to forestall threat of global warming. Heat wave across Europe or North America, or drying rivers, or soaring temperatures or floods are proofs that global warming is a huge concern. I'm sure we will all agree that global warming does not differentiate between developing and developed nations. There was an article in Economist which I was reading recently, and that talks about severity of climate change. The article specifically mentioned that heat waves and floods around the world may be a taste for years to come. Perhaps what we are seeing is just tip of the iceberg. This is indeed scary and a matter of concern. I think good news is that carbon neutrality agenda has gathered momentum. I think there is clear commitment made by leaders globally during COP26 conference to work on carbon neutrality. In 2018, only 25% of the countries across the world had a decarbonization horizon. Today, it's close to 90%, and that's a major shift. I think three triggers which is driving this behavior. One is climate change mitigation, second is energy security, and third is net zero targets. COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted supply chains globally, and countries across the world are reworking on their long-term supply chain strategies. Coming to India, we are committed to target of 500 gigawatt of RE capacity by 2030. India today is the third largest renewable energy producer in the world, and we have successfully attracted investment of over $75 billion in this sector. Honorable Prime Minister launched Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative with clear objectives of making our country self-reliant and making India a global manufacturing hub. Many incentives, both for domestic sales as well as exports, and innovative schemes like production link incentive, etc., have been announced over the last 2 years to promote manufacturing. I think there is a clear realization that it's time to unleash manufacturing potential in India in RE sector. India would be second to none, and we are well poised to become a global manufacturing hub. I believe India can be most competitive in manufacturing, and India has proven this in past in many sectors like wind, auto, pharma, textiles, agro, etc. India indeed has advantage of stable geopolitical environment and thriving manufacturing ecosystem across industries. India offers the best skilled talent, R&D expertise, and world-class engineering solutions. Entire world is looking at alternate supply chain destination, and India is certainly best suited. Significant investments in manufacturing have been announced in the last couple of years, be it for manufacture of solar modules or cells, or polysilicon, or electrolyzers, or fuel cells, or batteries, or glass, or other related components. The manufacturing capacity committed is far more than what we need in this country. And there is clear intent of Indian manufacturing sector to play a dominant role in global supply chain. With adoption of hydrogen and ammonia as fuel, over long term, India aims to be net exporter of energy. I think both India and EU countries have ambitious greening goals within the climate change agenda. Many companies across EU and India have made announcements of being net zero by 2050 or earlier. EU has an ambitious aim to undertake leadership in promoting sustainability goal number 7, which is about green energy. The goal is clear, which is to provide affordable, reliable, and modern energy to all. Evidently, our objective is common, and by partnering, we can further fast-track adoption of green energy in both EU and India. India has strength of being low-cost manufacturing base, academia, and skilling, while EU has significant strength in areas of innovation, R&D, and investment. I think together we have all the resources and ingredients which are required to fast-track greening agenda. This calls for collaborative working amongst EU nations and India so that we can reap the long-term benefits of socio-economic development. We certainly need to strengthen bilateral trade and investment ties between EU nations and India. I think partnerships between government, institutions, and businesses of the two regions will play a key role in making carbon neutrality dream come true. With this, I think I will stop, and I look forward to an enriching and inspiring session over the next few days. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would take the opportunity to invite Her Excellency Ms. Kadri Simson to kindly deliver the keynote remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Mr. Khuba, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. First, let me thank all the co-organizers of this gathering. This is an event about a pivotal technology at a pivotal time. All of here today understand how precious solar energy is. Both India and the EU have our sights set to net zero. The EU by 2050 and India by 2070. And India has committed to producing 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel energy by 2030. So each region has a clear ambition when it comes to decarbonizing our world. But what's clear to me is that while we can go far, if we go alone, we will go further together. And that need to go further has never been greater. This year, you experienced the hottest March in over 120 years. And we have witnessed the huge suffering and loss that goes with it. We are seeing extreme weather also in Europe, with a historic drought in the southern EU countries. If we do not pull out all our efforts into decarbonizing, we face the possibility that this extraordinary warm year becomes the coolest year of the next 120. This is one strong argument for solar, and I'm sure those of you in the room today agree with me. But there is another. The role of renewables has become even more significant because of another tragedy. This one is political, Russia's war against Ukraine. There was a time when people thought that renewables were less reliable than fossil fuels, but the past 6 months have taught us that being dependent on fossil fuels, especially those from Russia, is unpredictable and unsustainable. Moving to renewables is not just a good idea for our environment today and tomorrow, it's also a continuous strategic investment in security. Because every kilowatt hour of electricity we generate from solar, wind, hydropower, or biomass is one less that we rely on fossil fuels for. I know independence in every form is high on the agenda of this country. In 2047, you will celebrate the century of India's independence, and I know that President Modi has announced that your country should be energy independent by then. So it is in our common interest that we evolve from our old ways of polluting to newer, cleaner ones. And solar can be central to that evolution. The EU and India are very much on the same page here. The EU has been, from the beginning, a strong supporter of the International Solar Alliance, launched by India and France at COP21 in Paris. More and more EU member states are joining this important new organization based in India. I am therefore very happy to also have a Director General of the ICA, Dr. Mathur, speaking at today's event, opening the session on the need to diversify the global supply chain. Let me briefly tell you about what our plans for solar are on the EU side, and where we believe we can make the most difference. A few months ago, we brought forward our Repower EU package. As part of that, we aim to be at 45% renewable energy in our mix by 2030. A central tenet of the package that goes a long way to making this goal a reality is the EU solar strategy. With it, we want to get from 136 gigawatts of installed PV in the EU 2 years ago to 320 gigawatts by 2025 and to 600 gigawatts by 2030. These are big leaps, 136 gigawatts to 600 in just 10 years. But our strategy has 4 key areas that help us to do it. First, by promoting massive deployment on buildings through a European solar rooftop initiative. Second, we know that creating the demand is only part of the task. We also need to find a way around what is preventing industry from getting projects off the ground. So our strategy aims to make permitting procedures for solar installations shorter and simpler. Third, we want to invest more in the people side of things. So we will ensure an ample and skilled workforce for producing and deploying solar energy across the EU. And finally, industry. We are launching an European Solar PV Industrial Alliance. We want a resilient value chain, especially when it comes to manufacturing. This last point, of course, is topical for today. Energy is not only a resource issue, it's a geopolitical one. And this meeting point of energy, technology, and trade is shifting. Until now, we all know that manufacturing for solar PV has largely been dominated by one country. But putting all our eggs in one basket is a risky strategy, especially when the stakes are so high for the energy transition. These days, we live in a multipolar world. If renewables are the future, then how we source them should reflect that. Broadening the manufacturing market will decentralize this technology for future generations, and it will help to boost both Indian and European economies. This has been high on the agenda of the EU-India Clean Energy and Climate Partnership. We have had great cooperation so far when it comes to solar, on the operation of large solar parks, on the policy developments for rooftop PV, on the circularity in the supply chain, and other issues. There's much more to do and untapped potential to explore. Especially when it comes to realigning global supply chain, this is where recently established Trade and Technology Council will come into play. The EU and India can learn from each other, especially when it comes to diversifying supply chain and developing an open, competitive and rules-based market for solar. India and the EU are among the biggest democracies in the world. We have a responsibility to help drive the shift towards renewables. And we have an opportunity to use our common agenda and to work together and make that happen. I hope these remarks give some food for thought during today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam. Now I would like to invite His Excellency Shri Bhagwanth Khuba ji to please come to the stage and deliver his keynote remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Solar energy, diversification of the global supply chain, and EU-India cooperation in the area of manufacturing on the dais, Your Excellency, Ms. Kadri Simson, the European Commissioner for Energy, Samir Gupta ji, distinguished panelists and experts, ladies and gentlemen. India-EU cooperation in the field of renewable energy has been going from strength to strength over the last several years. The Clean Energy and Climate Partnership focuses on India's key priority areas including solar, offshore wind, hydrogen, ISCA, joint research and innovation, and energy efficiency, among others. Under solar energy, we have inter alia agreed to exchange insights and experiences on resilience of the complete value chain for PV. This event is an excellent platform to synchronize our plans and chart the way forward. The world has witnessed some major supply chain disruptions in the recent past. In order to avoid such disruptions in the future, the international community has rightly identified the need to diversify our supply chains to make them more resilient and responsive. This becomes even more crucial in the context of RE supply chains, as RE hold the key to a timely energy transition to avoid catastrophic effects of climate change. India has ambitious plans to tap solar energy to meet its electricity needs. Many developing countries to look forward to solar power to fuel their transitions. As such, the diversification of the solar supply chain becomes even more pertinent. India and EU must promote joint R&D in solar PV technology for improving efficiency and developing reliable, substitutes for silicon. Electronics hardware have to be an integral part of cooperation in this area, as it has the potential to disrupt these supply chains. India has been in the process of ramping up its domestic manufacturing capacity across the entire solar PV value chain, and we are doing it on a massive scale. India implemented a rupees 4,500 crore production-linked incentive scheme for high-efficiency solar PV modules in April 2021. Letters of award have been issued to 3 successful bidders for setting up approximately 8737 megawatt capacity of fully integrated solar PV module manufacturing units involving manufacturing of polysilicon, ingots, wafer, shell, and module. This year, an additional allocation of rupees 19,500 crores has been made for the PLI scheme, resulting in a total corpus of 24,000 crores, which is equivalent to about $3 billion US. India today has a solar manufacturing capacity of about 20 gigawatt, which is expected to rise about 75 gigawatt with the enhanced PLI scheme. This capacity will not only meet domestic requirements, but will also promote exports, making India a reliable partner for the global solar supply chain. We look forward to partner with EU to use India's capabilities to facilitate the diversification of the solar supply chain. I forwarded to the valuable insights of the distinguished speakers and panelists on ways to make this happen. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your words. Now I would request our esteemed guests to please take their seats in the audience, and we shall start our first session for the day. Thank you very much. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind our guests that we are having the B2b Networking Sessions starting at 4:30 p.m. today. For those of you who are interested, please contact the registration desk, and these sessions shall take place right across the hall in the room opposite. Thank you. Also, we do have feedback forms for our participants today, so I would request you to please fill them up using the scan code that's there on the 10 cards put on your table. Please provide us with your valuable feedback. Now we shall start with the first session of the day on solar energy diversification of the global supply chain. And I would like to invite Mr. Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, to please come and present the special address. Thank you.
Commissioner Simpson, Ambassador Astuto, friends, it's a pleasure to be here, and I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share our thoughts with you. At the International Solar Alliance, we have been looking at creating solar as the energy source of choice across the world. As we look at this, there are many challenges that come across. But one, which is the focus of today's discussion, focuses on how and where do we get the solar panels from. We at the International Solar Alliance are looking into this, and by the end of this month, hope to bring out a formal report on this subject. But let me take this opportunity to share some early findings with you. The first point that I'd like to make is that come what may, we will see the global demand for PV at the very minimum at approximately a cumulative capacity of 5,000 gigawatts by 2030. This is based on the kinds of additions that various countries have already announced. However, given the falling prices of solar, and I'll come back to the falling prices problem in a moment, and given the initiatives that have been launched regarding the geographical diversification of manufacturing, we expect this to be nearer 10,000 gigawatts rather than 5,000 gigawatts. Possibly somewhere near 8,000 is where we are looking at. What this means is that we are looking at an annual capacity addition, which has been about 200 gigawatts a year in the last few years, rising to a minimum of 800 to 1,000 gigawatts per year. This is a large number. It's a large number, and when you think of the distances over which these have to be carried, these seem to be pretty incredible. As I look at the numbers, it is very clear that we will obviously see the change over from fossil fuels to renewables, particularly solar in many parts of the world. But what is more interesting is that there will be growth in many markets, particularly in Latin America, West Africa, the Middle East, and East Africa. This also implies that the supply chains which Commissioner Simpson mentioned become even more important. Now, this is where I want to come to the price. Only 2 years ago in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, the prices of solar PV had bottomed to approximately 22 cents per watt. However, as we came out of the pandemic, a huge number of supply chain issues emerged. And today, the price is nearer 33 to 35 cents per watt. I would argue that the major change has been obviously because of the larger demand, but much more because of the choking of supply along the various supply chains that occur in the world. And you can imagine that as we go to a future where we look at 5 times the amount of solar panels being shipped than are shipped today, these supply chain choking points will only increase. It is important, therefore, that we look at the diversification of manufacturing across the world. Now, as we look at this, there are 3 different strands of thought that are emerging. The first is that the technologies themselves are changing. We have seen that in the near past, we have been looking at a number of monocrystalline technologies, but as we look to the future, we are seeing HGT technologies, cannot type. What is the full version for it? Which are also coming into the market. And as we look to beyond 2030, we are seeing even newer technologies come into the market. A very interesting technology that has been brought out doesn't look at deposition, but very much look at inkjet printing very much as you have out of laser jets. The second technological issue that has been happening is that we have seen batteries or storage emerge as a cost-effective technology, so that solar plus batteries promise to provide electricity at prices that are competitive with that from fossil fuels. If this indeed happens, and our expectation is that this will happen over the next 3 years, 2022, 2023, 2024, if it does happen, then we will see a large-scale change from fossil fuel, which is today already being used, particularly in the developed countries, as a backup for night use, to something that would be used only as an exception. So this is the first trend, changing technologies, and changing technologies obviously implies that new capacity is needed, and as the demand is increasing, we will see new capacity come up. There's no reason why the new capacity should come up in the same areas where it is. But what I leave you with, and I'll pick this up in a moment, is the fact that future policies to attract manufacturing therefore need to attract efficiency in the manufactured goods as well. The second point that I want to bring up is the fact that we have seen varying degrees of economies of scale along the entire cycle of manufacturing. I know that I'm speaking to an audience which knows far more about this than I ever will, but I am always perplexed by the fact that we are talking of, at the same time, of silicon being converted to polysilicon, polysilicon going to ingots, ingots going to wafers and cells going to modules which you and I buy. And then the question is asked, will we see this kind of broad-based manufacturing everywhere? So we looked at the data that we have for manufacturing and seeing the concentration of manufacturing across countries. Clearly, polysilicon requires huge economies of scale. Clearly, it requires electricity, which is very inexpensive and is available at nanosecond level of reliability. Consequently, we expect relatively few countries to be those where silicon to polysilicon gets made. And this would largely be driven, one by the connectivity of the places so that these logistics costs are minimized, and two, by the cost of electricity and the reliability of electricity supply. The second is the conversion of polysilicon to cells. This is comparatively easier. We already see cell manufacturing coming up in various countries, and there is no reason why many more countries, we expect that there will be something of the order of 20 to 50 countries across the world where cell manufacturing could find home. But the third is module manufacturing. And actually, I don't see any reason why almost every country in the world would not go in for cell manufacturing, especially looking at the kinds of demands. So some will come up sooner, others will come up later, but we do expect that manufacturing would be occurring everywhere. Module manufacturing. The third strand that I would like to bring together relates to what are the kinds of approaches that can be used to bring these technologies into these countries. As we look at what is happening globally, there are 2 or 3 things which I think are important to recall. The first is, when you set up a new manufacturing facility, the prices are higher than those of what is being produced today. In other words, there is a demand, there is a need for a hump of support in the early years. And countries which can provide support, which can support this hump over the first few years would be better off. They will be the places where manufacturing, whether of silicon to polysilicon or polysilicon to cells or cells to modules, will first come up. We have seen this occurring. The Indian Minister Khuba, spoke of the PLI scheme in India. We have seen the Inflation Reduction Act in the US bring in a huge amount of support through investment credits and through the tax credits. We have seen that in the European Union, the Solar Manufacturing Accelerator and the Solar Business Investment Platform have together brought in an environment within which investment in manufacturing could occur. I think as a global community, we need to support more and more countries in enabling this environment to occur. Right now, we are seeing that there are countries, our report will name countries, but right now I don't want to name countries. But there are largely three kinds of strategies that are being put. One is to copy modules, assemble them, and then vertically integrate. So we are seeing some countries where this is occurring. But as I said, what is more important is just not to copy, but also to provide incentives in a manner that innovation can occur. And we are seeing this leapfrogging occur. We are seeing, for example, HJT technology coming up early in various countries and being adopted by various companies. This, I think, represents the success of those countries where the incentives being provided are linked to efficiency increases in the years to come. But the third is also very interesting. It's not just solar panels that we need. We need glass for the solar panels. We need inverters. And we have seen that particular companies and particular countries are specializing in this. So, for example, most manufacturers across the world, whether in India or in China or in the US or in Europe, buy glass from the same manufacturer. This obviously makes sense from an innovation point of view, but competition would help in providing multiple options on this as well, and that's something else that countries could look into. We are also seeing thin films being the specialized product of certain companies. If we are looking at thin films as a technology of the future, again, I think it makes sense to support this company as well as others which go into thin film manufacturing. We look forward to a broad diversification, geographical diversification of manufacturing in the years to come. We believe that the kinds of volumes that the world is aiming for and the world will need would certainly need geographical diversification. We hope that we will work with all of you to see how this diversification can be of interest to users at the end, but also to governments which are seeking new manufacturing facilities, new jobs, and new kinds of ecosystems in the years to come. I thank you for your attention. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mathur. I would now like to invite Mr. Hemi Bahar from International Energy Agency to please deliver the special address. So we would request you to please time yourself to 8 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Commissioner, ambassadors, guests, and colleagues. Thank you very much for the invitation to share IEA views on the supply chain. Two important developments changed the way we looked at supply chains globally. The first one was, and still is, COVID-19, and the second one is Russia's war on Ukraine. And I believe that there is no going back to old way of looking at the global supply chains, and especially for the energy goods that we see today. If we see solar PV the largest electricity generating technology in 2050 in a net zero world, then the value of this technology and its resilience is becoming more and more important. Maybe the way we are looking at fossil fuels is the future of we will be looking at solar PV manufacturing goods and commodities. And today, I'd like to give you a few points about how at the IEA we see the solar PV manufacturing. There has been an important shift in global supply chain over the last decade, and we are now in a situation where one country accounts for 95% of the most critical segment of the global solar PV supply chain, which is the wafers. And this level of concentration for any technology, for any consumer good, or for any country is important for the resiliency of this technology. And how this has happened is the question that we need to answer here before looking at the future. And the answer is very simple. It's policy. China introduced a very comprehensive policy since 15 years to support an industry which is right now one of the largest in the world. And thanks to this policy, and thanks to this comprehensive policy, we saw an important reduction of cost, which now we are talking about green hydrogen production for solar PV. This is thanks to the 80% cost reduction of solar PV that we saw over the last decade, thanks to incredible scale of manufacturing. And however, there are some implications of this we need to understand very well. First implication is related to trade. These are traded goods, and solar PV trade accounts for about $50 billion today as a manufactured good, including all the segments. And one country obviously dominates this trade. And when we talk about these billions, maybe it's better to understand how much it makes up for China's trade balance, solar PV exports. It's about 7%. We are talking about half of Russia's gas exports value before the crisis here. It's not a small value that we are talking about. So this market is big, and it will only get bigger. On the other hand, for countries who are importing, it creates, especially with major markets such as US, India, and European Union, a big trade deficit for the solar PV manufacturing goods. So this industry is a big, and it will only get bigger. And it brings a lot of economic value to many countries. The second important point is a more risky one, that we expect that in the coming few years, solar PV will account for, in terms of the share of manufacturing, 95% for the two major segments of polysilicon and wafers, and maybe even more. And this obviously creates the resiliency and security of supply issue, I repeat, wherever it is located, independent of the country. Beyond this, we see that the facilities are concentrated in a single province, which is be subject to natural disasters or any type of risks that you can imagine. In addition to that, it is concentrated in single facilities, which means anything happens to that single facility, which is about 15% of the production, you see disruptions, which we saw already 3 times over the past years. So it's important to understand the different levels of vulnerabilities we checked at the IEA report. It also brings incredible amount of opportunities. In the next 8 years, we will see that solar PV supply chain investment will double. The job creation will double with it. And this creates an incredible economic value for countries who want to diversify every gigawatt of manufacturing creates more than 1,000 direct manufacturing jobs. I'm not counting indirect ones. And India is well placed to a major manufacturer of solar PV products. Its demand basically is now about 8% of the global demand, but the expectation that its annual demand will double, and the producers that India uses in its own market can expand very quickly. But not for modules, maybe not for cells, but the most important part of the supply chain, which is polysilicon and wafers, where the diversification is most needed. For the rest, we have a lot of overcapacity that is sitting around. But there is a major barrier here, the costs. And costs is related to policies, obviously. And right now, today, when we look at the detailed cost of the cost structure of the manufacturing, we see that there are large differences due to the problem of scale, which leads to higher investment costs in many countries, higher energy costs, especially for energy-intensive parts of the supply chain, and also the high overhead costs. India is well placed to produce solar PV manufacturing. Of course, it's currently more expensive than the major manufacturer, China, but the gap can be bridged with policies, which we already see today moving forward. And in that sense, there is only one way to create a cost-competitive solar PV production is actually cooperation. Because cooperation between countries in terms of technology, goods, and manufacturing knowledge will play an important role. This is where EU and India comes together, in my opinion. And there is an opportunity here, a big one, for job creation, for economic value, and future exports. But policies needs to close this gap, especially the gap related to investment costs, which are extremely different, as you can see in many countries. Few policy suggestions for global diversification from the IEA. The first one is very simple: diversify raw materials and manufacturing to create a more resilient supply chain. This is a simple one, but difficult to achieve. Second, use policies to de-risk investment. These investments, especially polysilicon on wafers, are risky investments. They have high upfront costs and a fluctuating price market. So they need to be really taken into account by creating policies. The third one, ensure environmental and social sustainability. Solar PV should add value not only through electricity generation, but also through environmental sustainability to the world. Second one, innovate, innovate, innovate. There is an incredible room for innovation that has already been achieved, and we are looking forward to more. The third one, work on recycling. This will come very soon in the future as a major topic, and it is a challenging one. And I invite all the developers and manufacturers to design panels that are easily manufactured for our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. It's now time for our first high-level panel discussion. So I would start by inviting Mr. Matej Hayes, Director of Global Affairs, Solar Power Europe, to the stage. Sir, please. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Manoj Gupta, Vice President, Renewable Energy, Business Asia Forum. Please, sir. Now I would like to invite Mr. Sandy Khera, Country Manager and CEO, Enel Green Power. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Subramaniam Pulipaka, CEO, NSEFR. I would also like to invite Ms. Sindoor Mittal, Vice Chairperson, Avada Group. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Vish Iyer, Chief Commercial Officer, Jackson Group, please. Lastly, I would like to invite our moderator for the session, Ms. Sonia Van Ranson, Editor-in-Chief, Energy Monitor. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Ranson.
Thank you. Is that working? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind introduction and invitation to join you here today. I'm indeed Editor-in-Chief of Energy Monitor, a digital publication dedicated to the energy transition, energymonitor.ai. Do take a look. We're going to get stuck straight into the panel debate because we don't have very much time, because I know the Secretary has got a hard deadline to leave in the next session, so that has a knock-on effect on us. So let's kick off with you, Mate, Mr. Heist. So we're going to start with the European perspective, and we'll try and swap around to go from the EU into India and back again. So from a European perspective, what role, we've already heard a lot of thoughts, but what role do you see or do you think India could play in the global solar supply chain going forward?
Thank you for the question, Sonia. And first of all, let me start by thanking the organizers for inviting us. And Solar Europe is very happy to be a supporter of this event. It's a really high priority topics that we're talking about today. And I also wanted to convey warm greetings from our CEO, Valborg Hemmetsberger, who really wanted to be here, but unfortunately didn't make it due to a logistical challenge that we weren't able to resolve. Now, regarding your question, what role should or could India play in the diversification of the global supply chain? So we all know that India is already one of the biggest markets in terms of deployment. But when it comes to manufacturing and diversification of the supply chain, we do think, we do believe that India could play and should play a key role in the diversification of the supply chain. So in fact, we are really impressed by the ambition and also the measures that have already been implemented and are being implemented by the government of India to reach these objectives. And as a matter of fact, this ambition is really well aligned by the ambition and the objectives of the European Union, to which Commissioner Simpson alluded in her presentation. So in Europe, we aim to achieve 20 gigawatt worth of manufacturing covering the entire silicon value chain by 2025, at least 20 gigawatt. That would amount to at least 1/3 of the demand that we forecast for 2025. And so these shared objectives, I believe, make India and the European Union ideal partners to cooperate in this area and to help each other to reinforce our roles as leaders in the global renewable energy transition.
Okay, thank you. So Europe aims to build enough to supply 1/3 of its demand. The rest will come from abroad, presumably India amongst other places.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's go to India then with Mr. Pulipaka, so from the National Solar Energy Federation here. We heard the enormous concentration, China in particular. Can India provide an alternative to China going forward?
Thank you very much, Sonia, for the question, and thank you very much for having me here. And I think the answer to your question is very simple, yes, and definitely. If you look at this global supply chain today, we know the dependency on China. But India has an ambitious set of targets, especially in terms of manufacturing. According to our statistics, in line with the government's program, if everything goes well, we'll be home to 60 gigawatt of solar manufacturing in the next 3 to 4 years. That is end-to-end manufacturing I'm talking about. So you see the kind of potential you can look at. Like Matt was mentioning, EU was looking at 20 gigawatt. So that is 1/3 of the total demand, and maybe the remaining 2/3 can come from India to EU. That's how we are looking at the supply chain part. And when we look at India's stage at which the solar energy growth is today, we have matured from a nascent developing solar market into a much mature developing market. From a government-driven demand, we are into a market-driven demand. So if everything goes right, India will be home to 1 out of every 3 solar modules installed in the world by 2030. That's the kind of potential we're looking at, and that's the kind of market India is. Having said that, when we look at India-EU cooperation specifically, I have to acknowledge here that with Solar Power Europe, we have excellent relations. We have commissioned 4 studies. 2 of them are in pipeline, so that will be 6 in last 3 years. And all these things are aimed at strengthening India's position as the global leader in supply chain, while also ensuring that we establish this cooperation between India and Europe. And when it comes to net zero also, you know, India is taking a big plunge, like EU Commissioner has mentioned. And yes, overall, yes, India is the alternative, and yes, India is where the action is.
Okay, thank you. So yes, India is going to be a partner in these more difficult parts of the supply chain, like wafers and polysilicon, where we heard there are probably not very many countries that will be viable as alternatives there too.
That's a very interesting question. If you look at the construct of the production-linked incentive scheme that the government has launched, we concluded a first tranche of that scheme with 4,500 crores, and the second tranche is in progress for 19,500 crores. So this aims at building the end-to-end supply chain from polysilicon to wafer, ingot, cell plus module. So when I say 60 gigawatt, I am talking about end-to-end, and yes, we are prepared for it.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn then to an actual power producer with Mr. Gupta from Fortum. What kind of solar and related investments have you made in India so far, and why, and how does the future look? How does your future business look?
Sure.
There?
Thank you. Hello. Yeah. Okay. So Fortum started their operation in India in 2013. Fortum is basically Finland-based utility company. So we started with a very small size of 5 megawatt. We acquired 5 megawatt solar plant and started our journey from there. But within a short period of 10 years, I would say, short period of 10 years, from India perspective, we say 10 years is a big period, but from Nordic market perspective, Nordic company perspective, we say 10 years is a very small period for a company to grow in India. So we started with 5 megawatt, and in last 10 years, we have grown up to around 2 gigawatt of solar portfolio. So we have almost around 950 megawatt of operational plant and a pipeline of around 1.1 gigawatt, which need to be executed in next 3 years' time. So effectively, from 5 megawatt, we went to 10 megawatt. It was a slow and steady growth. 5 megawatt to 10 megawatt, 10 megawatt to 70, 70 to 100, then multiple of 250 megawatt, now multiple of 300 megawatt. So along with slow and steady growth, along with the time, we kept on developing our confidence on Indian market, and company decided to grow with a progressive scale. And going forward, if we talk about, as I mentioned, we were doing we were adding multiple of megawatt, but now going forward, every year we plan to add around 1 gigawatt of capacity. So this is how the confidence in the market has developed. Now the question is why we have grown, why we have entered into this market. So we can, everybody, I mean, as an investor, everybody can see that India is a market where there is a clear visibility how much megawatt will be done, how much gigawatt will be done. Initially, government came out with a 20 gigawatt plan by 2022, then they increased from 20 gigawatt to 100 gigawatt, then from 100 gigawatt by 2022. Now the next target is around 350 gigawatt of solar by 2030, and then maybe 500 megawatt by 2035. So these kind of targets, so any investor can see the clear visibility for next 20-30 years. So you can plan your investment, you can plan building up your team, you can plan building up your investment in this country. In addition to that, not only the market size you are seeing, another thing is different business model you see in India. India started with pure solar, pure wind. Now you see solar wind hybrid happening, solar wind hybrid with storage is happening. India is also planning to come out with hydrogen mission, where you will see ammonia and hydrogen will be produced, green hydrogen will be produced. So there is a huge market which anybody as an investor can see on a long-term basis.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's turn to your colleague then at Enel, so another European utility but with a strong presence in India, Sandy Kira. How do you see the role of solar in getting India on track to net zero, and what challenges are there for European businesses who are investing in this country?
Sure. Thank you for the questions, and pleasure being here, so thank you for inviting us. See, when we look at India's net zero ambitions and the energy transition, we also need to consider it in the context of India's economic growth and development path. Right? We will soon be the most populous country in the world, and we'll be home to probably the youngest population around the world. So the path to growth and our development, economic growth, rapid and equitable economic growth will be critical to meet the growth and lifestyle aspirations of this 1.4 billion population that we have in India. And if you look at from a growth standpoint, if not decades, at least we are years away from reaching our peak of economic growth, which means even per capita income, energy consumption, even emissions and coal usage, right? But we can't afford to go down the path of growth fueled by fossil fuels. And this is a unique opportunity for us as a country to embrace and leapfrog using low emission or no emission technologies without trying to meet the requirements of affordable and reliable power without affecting the energy crisis in certain ways. So, and this is where solar will play a key role, given its cost competitiveness and adaptability. But and some experts talked about, some reports say that about 5,000 gigawatts are required within India up to 2050 or up to 2070 from the 50 gigawatts we have right now. But will storage alone, or will solar alone solve this? Likely not. As Manoj said, it will have to be a combination of solar plus wind plus storage technologies and also green hydrogen probably. So probably what we'll see is the next few decades will be the decades of electrification of energy, and there solar will play a huge role.
Okay, thank you.
And in terms of,
Can you, perhaps very briefly.
On challenges.
The main challenge you see, let's stick with the top one.
Yeah, I mean the opportunity is huge, as Manoj talked about, right? But on the challenges, challenges remain as you expect for any developing economy, right? The financial health of the discoms, because as you're investing in India, the ultimate procurer and the end consumer is the discom. The central government is very proactive in its approach, but there is a divergence between policies at the central level and at the state level. So aligning those sometimes become a challenge. And then of course you need, for execution, there are issues around land acquisition, land policies. Those need to be aligned. And then of course a lot of transmission and evacuation infrastructure needs to be put in place to make sure we have, on the one hand, yes, domestication of the supply chain is something that the government is working on and the industries are working on. So that's a healthy sign now.
Okay, thank you. Our final speaker then, Mr. Vishayar, so from the Jackson Group. So you're actually in the manufacturing chain. So I guess the question to you is, I mean, when you're speaking or looking at the European market as well as the Indian market, do you think, I mean, can you provide the products that everyone wants, and everyone wants high quality, cheap, always available? Can you be a part of this new resilient supply chain? Well, how, I guess, need to manage our expectations but be ambitious at the same time.
So first of all, thanks to the organizers for having me out here as well. And I think most of the valid points have been covered by all my co-panelists. I think everybody's been spot on. But I think, as you rightly asked me the question pertaining to what we're doing, especially with our approach as far as the entire value chain is concerned. We offer EPC, we offer solar modules, all of that under one single house. So I think that's just taking a step back from what we do. I think the opportunity that's available is mouth-watering. From the perspective of what's happening globally, and I think with the myriad kind of complex events that keep sort of engulfing us every couple of years, I think we are into this phase where complexity is something that we live in, with what we do. And I think the Indian supply chains today are much more robust. I would say we've migrated from projections of performance over the last decade, to be quite honest, I think in every aspect and every area that we can think of. And I think that gives us quite a lot of confidence as a company, as also somebody who's maybe having 0.5 gigawatt of manufacturing capacity, scaling it up to close to 1 gigawatt pretty shortly by end of this year, gives us huge amount of confidence that we can play the role that Europe expects us to play, at least as far as that particular continent is concerned. But I think besides of that, on the challenges aspect, I think which briefly was also touched upon, two key areas that I think we would like to focus on. I think one is this sort of inverted focus on the manufacturing across the value chain. So I think one is we're talking about on the module side, a very heavy number that's being spoken about, close to about 60 gigawatts. While when you go up slightly up the ladder, we are talking of a very smaller quantity. So I think compared to the global value chain, especially I would say Chinese value chain, the Indian value chain really needs to pick that piece up. But I guess it's a matter of time which will correct the capacity by itself over a period of time between wafer, cell, ingots and modules. But I think at the moment we do have that to be a challenge that needs to be addressed. And I think second is ramping up to the technology needs of the developed markets, right? I think that's something which is often spoken about in all the corridors. The world is progressing, at least as far as crystalline is concerned, the world is progressing from let's say mono-PERC to HJT as well as TOPCon. So I think that will be a challenge that India would also need to sort of live up to very quickly, and I think very fast, given the kind of energy crisis that we need to address, not only I think in Europe, but also as other parts of the world. So I think those are the two, I would say, challenges that come to the top of the mind, but I think absolutely great opportunity.
Okay, and do you think, we saw earlier that the cost gap between China and India is there, but it's not enormous? How optimistic are you that can be closed, and over what kind of time frame?
Well, I think that there are two moving parts out here. One is the price, with just an absolute focus on price without understanding what's going on in the value chains across the border. I think what we're also looking at is China migrating to new technologies. The point that I mentioned earlier is that India will have to look up to how we can actually quickly match up to that kind of R&D and innovation at scale that China is currently dishing out, so as to be talking about meeting those price targets, right? I mean, there's no point of us beating mono-PERC prices 2 years on the line when you actually have HJT prices in the market. So I think as a model maker, I think that keeps us awake overnight. That's something which we keep thinking most of the time. So I think that's one of the principal challenges that we need to address vis-a-vis, I think, a geographically situated competitor close to us, who has all the might, who has all the scale. But I think that's a matter of time. I think it's about 3 to 5 years time. And I think this crisis, again, as we see in Europe, that's developing, is not a 1 year crisis, right? I mean, we're talking about people seeing 3 winters, 3 summers of this crisis that we've seen unfolding in front of us right now. So I think we are confident that I think the country can match up to that over the next 3 to 4 maybe seasons. But I think there is a lot more yet to unfold, right, in the global market. So we need to see how that really pans out.
Okay, thank you. I see I've still got 7 minutes. Is that true, or do we need to finish now? Do we need to finish, or can we continue? We need to finish? Okay, because the timer is telling me we still have some time. Okay, maybe can I have one very short final intervention? I'm going to just go back to Mate maybe in terms of cooperation, since we talked on manufacturing very briefly, what opportunities you see in India.
Yes, thank you very much. So first of all, we're very happy to see that this topic is being taken up on such a high level. And at Solar Power Europe, we already have a number of companies such as Fortum or Enel Green Power active in India, mainly in the project development and investment part of the value chain. But we also have an increasing number of companies, European manufacturers, looking at India, given the latest developments. But I think that in order to be able to unlock the opportunities related to manufacturing cooperation, there are a couple of things that need to be done. A couple of examples or a couple of recommendations. For example, as part of the ongoing negotiations about the EU-India Free Trade Agreement, we think that manufacturing should be a priority topic. There could be a dedicated chapter on manufacturing, especially solar manufacturing. We also think that the basic customs duty should not be applied on European solar products. because this would then help to create a joint European-Indian value chain. Because indeed, the 20 gigawatt that I was talking about, the objective of the EU by 2025, it's not meant to be only for European use. It's meant to be intertwined with a global value chain. As part of, we should also encourage an exchange about production incentive schemes and measures, and also speak about how we can jointly make them WTO compliant. We should also speak about standards, quality standards to an extent. That's something that NSCFI and Solar Power Europe have already been working on a lot, but also sustainability standards. So for example, the EU is in the process of introducing eco-design and energy labeling standards. And this could be a basis for discussions between EU and India about sustainability for solar products. So in conclusion, Solar Power Europe stands ready to play an active role in this, and we really encourage and invite the Indian government, the European Union, also the CECP, the Clean Energy and Climate Partnership, to support this effort strongly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to give the rest of the panel a chance to respond, but unless you tell me otherwise, we will wrap up. Yes, we need to wrap up? Okay. In that case, a big thank you. I wish we had more time. I hope you have a chance to continue the discussion informally the rest of today. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank our panelists and moderator for such an insightful discussion. Now it's time for our second session of the day, but before we go on to the second session, I would request all of you to please take out the time to fill in the feedback forms. You can find the scan code on your tent cards or kept on your tables. Please take out the time to fill the feedback for us. And once again, I would like to remind those interested in B2b networking sessions, if you need any further details around it, and if you would be interested in networking with other organizations, please reach out to the registration desk. Thank you. Now, we shall start with the second session, which is around EU-India cooperation in the area of manufacturing. And I would like to start by first introducing Ms. Jyoti Mukul as the Principal CII, and I would like to now invite her for the introductory remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we all know, and here is a fairly knowledgeable gathering, India ranked third in renewable energy installations in 2021, and this marked a recovery from the COVID-induced setbacks, especially in the renewable energy sector. Globally, renewable energy power capacity addition grew about 17% last year, and overall the capacity installation increase was 11%. Nonetheless, India was the second largest market in Asia for new solar PV capacity, and it ranked third in solar PV capacity addition. In terms of overall solar installations, India was fourth, overtaking even Germany for the first time. While this pace of capacity addition and the growth in the solar market is heartening, supply chain disruptions in the very well integrated ecosystem in renewable energy space creates concerns both within the industry and also impacts the government's planning and targets for the sector. For instance, there have been reports recently of power outages across China's one of the provinces, which is posing a new clean energy supply chain challenge. At the same time, the cost of raw material has gone up because of the Ukraine war, and there are disruptions in the manufacturing hubs in China. This has led to even increase in the lithium compounds of electric car batteries, polysilicon, used in solar panels. So combined with both the increase in energy cost as well as increase in the raw material cost, the renewable energy sector is likely to be impacted and is being impacted for last few years ever since COVID came. So that's one point as far as the cost is concerned. China, in fact, produces most modules and cells, followed by Taiwan and Malaysia. And for India's ambitious renewable energy capacity addition program, creation of domestic market manufacturing capacity is therefore a strategic requirement. And at the same time, there are colleagues from European Union here as well. They will also conquer that there are supply chain squeeze on conventional fuel like natural gas, which makes it absolutely necessary to integrate more renewable energy capacity into the energy market. As far as the manufacturing side of renewable energy is concerned, a close coordination between India and Europe, especially when it comes to incorporation of better technology, is therefore very important. Solar panels, cells, modules are both important for those two regions to come out of the very concentrated or whether market dominated by China. India is coming out with production-linked incentives and other kind of programs to promote domestic manufacturing. So where there's no doubt green power will be generated, a large part of the required gear is currently coming from third countries. Therefore, there was this announcement by the EU Commissioner on EU Solar PV Alliance, and this can be a starting point for collaborations between the two sides. The presence of a large or a good number of European companies already in India's electricity market, which is also dominated by the conventional power right now, it can help in India transitioning to renewable energy space as they can easily incorporate better technologies into their Indian arms. We need to come together to diversify supply chains, incorporate efficient technologies, reduce carbon footprint when it comes to manufacturing in renewable energy space, and also promote circularity in the manufacturing. With these words, I would call upon other speakers to add value to the whole discussions.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to invite Shri Indu Shekhar Chaturvedi, Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India, to please deliver the special address.
Thank you very much. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by stating that solar manufacturing across the world is likely to see major shifts in the coming months and years. And this is a shift which is both needed and desirable. Today, about 650 gigawatt of solar PV module manufacturing capacity exists globally, and about 75 to 80% of this capacity is in one country. For a strategic sector like electricity, this is not a satisfactory state of affairs. And I think countries around the world are cognizant of the need for diversification of solar supplies. Let me also state that India and EU can together work effectively toward diversification of the solar supply chains. India has ambitious plans in solar manufacturing. We have been following a multi-pronged approach to build domestic solar manufacturing capacities. And this includes domestic content requirement in government schemes like Kusum and Solar Rooftop, and the CPSU scheme, imposing tariff barriers on imports, the basic customs duty of 40% on solar modules and 25% on solar cells, and also the performance-linked incentives to manufacturers who set up the initial capacities. Now, the performance-linked incentive scheme, the first tranche of about rupees 4,500 crore or euro 570 million saw a huge response. And I think for the first time we will see wafer and polysilicon capacities coming up in India. A total of around 8.7 gigawatt of capacities is likely to come up by 2024. As a result of the measures we have taken, our module manufacturing capacity has gone up to about 20 gigawatt from 10 gigawatt slightly more than a year back. And the cell manufacturing capacity has also increased by not as much as the module manufacturing capacity, but it has gone up to 4 to 5 gigawatt from about 3 gigawatt a year earlier. The second tranche of the performance, the production-linked incentive scheme is on way, and that is about 4 times higher, more than 4 times higher than the first tranche. It is about rupees 19,500 crore, which translates into 2.47 billion euros. And going by the experience of the last tranche, I think we hope to see capacities of about 65 gigawatt of module manufacturing in the country once this bid is awarded and the capacities are commissioned. These huge capacities that will come up need to be seen in the context of our targets. India aims to achieve about 500 gigawatt of installed electricity capacity from non-fossil fuel-based sources by the year 2030. And out of this, about 300 gigawatt would come from solar. And given the stage we are at, this would translate into about 30 gigawatt of solar capacity addition every year. And the capacities that are likely to come up should be enough for this, and with a sizable quantity which for exports too. And the challenge here before us is to ensure good quality and competitive prices. And I think the PLI scheme tries to take care of this by rewarding high efficiencies. It also tries to take care of competitiveness by tapering off subsidies over a period of 5 years, so that the industry is aware that it has to be really competitive and cannot survive on subsidies alone. We also are trying to increase the share of high quality modules in our domestic capacity. And I think there is a likelihood that we will put in place a mechanism which phases out very low quality modules, of course, after giving due notice and the required time for manufacturers to adjust. But that is something which the minister is very keen on and which is likely to happen. The solar PV supply chain is one of the most geographically concentrated supply chains in the world, as I have said. And we are trying to reach a position to not only be self-sufficient, but also to be able to export. The other major country which is building solar capacities, I think, is the United States. And there also it will take some time for huge capacities to come up. Meanwhile, Indian companies are exporting currently also, and this is a contentious issue. While the manufacturers say that their exports are very limited, there is another side which the developers put forward, that a large quantity is being exported, and that is being exported because of certain measures which have been taken, say, by the US, the Forced Labor Prevention Act, which prevents supplies from China and therefore opens up market for Indian exporters. Now this is, I think, a double-pronged thing, a double-edged thing. So if we export to the US, we'll also have to be mindful that the components which have gone into our exports do not have the Xinjiang connection. We look toward Europe for technological innovation, obviously, and I happened to be in Germany a few days back. It was very impressive, the sort of technologies they are trying, the sort of module innovations they are trying. And that is something we hope to benefit from as far as the EU is concerned, the technology, the investment, and we do hope that the manufacturing capacities that come up in India and with EU help will be top class and will produce very high quality modules. India and the EU have a long legacy of collaboration and cooperation in various sectors of the economy. In 2016, the India-EU Clean Energy and Climate Partnership was established. The current areas of collaboration include offshore wind, rooftop solar parks, RE integration and storage, and so on. We can learn from Europe in areas like agro-PV and floating solar technologies. And I think the jury is still out on the advantages and disadvantages of floating solar technologies. And there's a lot of research that is being done in the EU, within the geographical area of EU, and we hope to benefit from that. The work plan for collaboration for 2021 to 2023 also includes supply and value chains of solar PV, and that is something which is relevant in the context of today's discussion. So before I end, let me also touch upon something which the previous speaker mentioned about the demand-supply tension in India. So if you have a public policy intervention which tries to bend market forces or change market forces, then in at least the short term, some wrinkles are bound to emerge. And that is what has happened in India. So what we did for solar manufacturing was a huge public policy intervention. And that has caused some disruption, which any such public policy intervention is likely to cause. And we are looking at high prices of solar PV cells and modules. And one complaint is, and it's a complaint, I don't claim that is true. One complaint is that the domestic manufacturers have ramped up prices, so to match the import prices after the imposition of customs duty. We are looking into all these issues. The chances are that these issues will settle on their own, but that would take time. So we are also looking at measures which we could possibly take over the next, say, a month, which could ease the situation a bit. And I think I am hopeful that these measures will provide some relief to the market, to the solar market. So let me end with these words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to invite Mr. Frank Bio, Minister Councillor, Head of Cooperation, Delegation of the European Union to India, for the special address.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it's a pleasure to speak in this high-level event, co-organized with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, in close cooperation with the Confederation of Indian Industry and Solar Power Europe, in the context of the visit of our Energy Commissioner to India. The Commissioner visit signals the high importance of the European Union attaches to clean energy transition and climate change, and how critical it is for the EU and India to work closely together. As you know, the IPCC warned recently that to prevent the worst effect of climate change, global emission of CO2 would have to peak within the next 3 years and then start decreasing. As mentioned, extreme weather events around the world remind us of the dramatic consequences of inaction. Both the EU and India attach high importance to the implementation of the Paris Agreement, to increasing our energy security, to make our energy more affordable, reliable, and sustainable. We both have very ambitious renewable energy targets. To talk about India, Prime Minister Modi's announcement at COP26 helped to keep the focus on the 1.5 degree of the Paris Agreement, a goal which remains within reach, but for which the work is far from done. The renewable energy target of 500 gigawatts by 2030 is a prime example in this context. Prime Minister Modi also announced that India should be energy independent before it celebrates its 100 years of independence, so in 2047. We need to act now. We must be ambitious and fast in our decisions. I am happy to note that both the EU and India have embarked on a pathway to net zero emissions. Reducing the carbon intensity of our economies, supporting the clean energy transition through increasing the use of renewable energy sources and energy efficiency must remain at the top of both our domestic and external agenda. The EU is guided by the European Green Deal and the climate law, which makes our commitment legally binding. So to deliver at least diminution of 55% of net greenhouse gas emission by 2030 and reach climate neutrality by 2050. Renewables are the cheapest and cleanest energy available and can be generated domestically, reducing energy imports. As regards investments in the clean energy transition, we have now an important additional reason to become independent of the import of fossil fuels. For Europe, as our Commissioner has said, the war that Russia has unleashed against Ukraine is a stark reminder that our dependency on Russian fossil fuels is not sustainable. Our transition to homegrown renewable energy is not only good for the environment, but it also becomes a strategic investment in terms of our own security. Our Commissioner referred to our ambitious EU solar energy strategy, with which we want to get from 136 gigawatts installed in 2020 to almost 600 by 2030, so in 10 years. The strategy foresees 4 initiatives to achieve this. Firstly, by promoting quick and massive PV deployment on buildings via a European solar rooftops initiative. Second, by making permitting procedures for solar installation shorter and more simple. Thirdly, by ensuring the availability of an abundant and skilled workforce for producing and deploying solar energy all across Europe. And fourthly, by launching a European solar PV industry alliance for a resilient industrial value chain, especially in the PV manufacturing sector. As stressed by the Commissioner today, we would be interested in exploring with India how we can together contribute to broadening the manufacturing market and establishing this more resilient industrial infrastructure. As highlighted at the EU-India leaders meeting last year, this was in May 2021, we continue working closely together with the government of India in the area of the clean energy transition, which will be crucial for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, as well as our own energy security. As mentioned by the Secretary, the 2016 EU-India Clean Energy and Climate Partnership is a strategic platform for working together on a large variety of important issues related to energy and climate. With India, we have established a detailed work plan which includes cooperation on key requirements for the clean energy transition, such as first, energy efficiency, renewable energy, including solar and offshore wind farms, green hydrogen, including the establishment of an EU-India Green Hydrogen Forum, which will be convened tomorrow for the first time, grid integration, sustainable financing, and just energy transition, so leaving no one behind. Again, as our Commissioner indicated, we aim at expanding this cooperation to also jointly secure resilient global supply chain for PV system, reinforce and deconcentrate global solar PV manufacturing. Going forward, we will continue with relevant stakeholders in Europe and India with the aim to identify concrete opportunities to strengthen the global PV supply chain. The EU is also working closely with the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, both launched by India and based in India. The EU-India Connectivity Partnership and the EU Global Gateway offer additional avenues for cooperation and climate action. Under the Connectivity Partnership, we support sustainable digital transport and energy network and the flow of people, goods, services in a sustainable and inclusive manner. The Global Gateway initiative, launched in December last year, is the European strategy to boost smart, clean, and secure links in digital, climate, energy, and transport sector, as well as to strengthen health, education, and research around the world. Global Gateway is about increasing investments, including private sector investments, focusing on promoting democratic values, high standards, good governance, and transparency in equal partnerships, using all financial and development tools at the EU's disposal and supported by the strong commitment of our individual EU member states. Global Gateway aims at mobilizing investments up to 300 billion euro outside Europe between 2021 and 2027. The EU and India join forces today in co-hosting this event, as we are both convinced of the importance and potential of solar energy, both for industries and the general public consumption. Every kilowatt hour of electricity we generate for solar, wind, hydropower, or biomass reduces our dependency on fossil fuels in general. Because of our shared concern and vision, we are very keen to collaborate with India. I think it was repeated many times today, exchanging information, sharing experiences, and comparing notes about our European and Indian policies and strategy. So, to conclude, on behalf of the delegation of the European Union, I would like to thank the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, the Confederation of Indian Industry, and Solar Power Europe for working with us today and the years to come. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I wish you all to end with a fruitful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It's now time for our second high-level panel discussion. Firstly, I would like to invite Shri Pradeep Kumar Das, Chairman and Managing Director, IREDA, to the stage, please. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Sanjay Sharma, Director Solar, SECI. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Edward Bumsteins, Head of Asia and Pacific Division, Global Partners Department, European Investment Bank, to the stage, please. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Jan Enno Bicker, CEO, REC. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Iliano Russo, Head, 3 Sun Gigafactory, Enel Green Power. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Sujoy Ghosh, VP and Country Manager, India First Solar. And lastly, I would like to invite our moderator for this session, Ms. Jyoti Mukul, to the stage. Over to you, Ms. Mukul.
Hello everyone. We are, the topic for our panel discussion is the EU-India cooperation in the manufacturing sector, and from the previous discussions, the idea behind mutual cooperation is diversifying the supply chain and having a more resilient supply chain, so that in times of emergency, whether it's a health emergency or a pandemic like COVID, or whether it's a geopolitical emergency like the Ukraine war, there is no disruption in the supply chain and abnormal fluctuation in the price of the renewable energy manufacturing gear. I would like to start with Mr. Das from IRIDA, and IRIDA is a big financial institution in the renewable energy space, supported by the Indian government, and it tries to finance various activities in the renewable energy space and promote government agenda for better financing. Mr. Das, we would like to know from you, what is the availability of financing currently for the manufacturing sector, and especially how far the government's production-linked incentive program, it promotes efficiency, but does it also promote technological tie-up between various countries and various companies of different nationalities?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. First of all, as she said, IRIDA is the big organization. I said IRIDA is the mother organization for renewable energy development in the country. When nobody was doing renewable energy financing, IRIDA was doing. Since 7 to 8 years, when the traditional RE sectors has matured, or there is less asymmetry in information, then other lenders are jumping in. Today, if you see, our loan book is 1/5 of the total installed capacity we have lended in the country. But if you see, our loan book, out of 10% of it is towards manufacturing. So which implies, essentially there was no focus on manufacturing. Of late it is there. And we have already supported roughly 4 gigawatt of manufacturing capacity through our lending. See, as a financer, we need 2-3 things. Stability. When the developer wants to set up the project, they want 3-4 things. That is stable governance, stable policy, and technological certainty, so that the future market is there. And when you talk about RE, the future market is assured none other than by the Government of India itself, and none other than by our Honorable Prime Minister himself. So that demand side is guaranteed. Now we have to augment the supply side. And through financing giving a stable policy, our Honorable Minister takes quarterly review meetings with the stakeholders. That is essentially. Apart from quarterly, as and when required, that also. Honorable Secretary takes every monthly. We in IRIDA do every quarterly. So that asymmetry of information we are trying to remove. And if you see the total GDP of India, it was not manufacturing centric, it was service centric.
So now we are shifting towards manufacturing centrics. You can say COVID pandemic or Russian-Ukraine conflict, whatever is there, the today order of the day, our slogan is Atmanirbhar Bharat, make in India, make for India and make for world. It is not that we want to just support our requirement, we are supporting. So as a developer, and this lender and developer has to have a very close and transparent relationship, probably which was not available earlier. Now, because of the quality of governance, quality and commitment and the accountability in place, those are becoming easier. In India, essentially the developing manufacturing space, in general, Indian business is run by family-based. And in case of family-based, you will not find that kind of corporate governance. And so, lender's perspective, when you go for lending, you find those problems. But we have attempted to eradicate to large extent in that. And through constant dialogue with the stakeholders, what is their requirement? One example I am giving. As we were not focusing earlier, this manufacturing segment people, they used to request a lot that please reduce the interest. Not only we have reduced interest, we have also created a categorization up to 200 gigawatt, 200 to 500, above 500. So that categorization allowed them some 25 bips to 75 bips of differential rates. So that had made the economics in their funding. And as far as funding is concerned, with European agencies, IREDA is having a quite old relationship. All the bilateral agencies, they preferred IREDA as a safe and convenient and a most preferred route, I should say. And since all along we have focused on project development, now we are focusing in manufacturing. We are the nodal agency for this PLI scheme of 4,500. We did the bidding within very few time, 3 bidders took the entire year. That's the reason Government of India understood immediately, and then they have the PLI 2 in place. That means Government of India is also very quite keenly and closely watching and observing and contributing in the dialogue process to eradicate, remove all this asymmetry in information. So that it is a win-win situation for all. Until unless that win-win situation will be there, no manufacturer will be comfortable to come and set up in India. And particularly today, Indian manufacturer setting. Time will come, like FDI, 100% route is there in RE. Others will also come here. I'll tell 3-4 points in which we can focus to strengthen our further relationship. That innovative financing, because traditional financing will not work, because you have to see with respect to the emerging needs and requirements. And R&D, because when you are setting up the manufacturing process, you have to have strong R&D in place. Probably largely in India, we have not focused that much in the past on R&D to that extent. But here we have to essentially do that. Not one time. Continuous and consistent R&D investment has to be there. Then learning and policy and regulatory landscape. That is very much important. So much of regulations are coming. We must learn and we must adapt and adapt. Those are very much important. And in this line, I expect the European Union agencies to handle IREDA the way they did in last 35 years. And I can assure from this platform, will ensure the fastest and speediest development in the country. Thank you.
Mr. Das, that was those were very encouraging words, especially for the Indian industry from you. We also have another financer in the European Investment Bank, Mr. Everdas, and from him I would like to know that what is the scope of, say, investment opportunities in India and how far the financing for it is available? What kind of tie-ups are you looking for in the renewable energy space in India?
Should I use your microphone? Hello. Thank you, first of all, to the European Union delegation for inviting EIB, the European Union's Climate Bank, to attend this wonderful session, and also many thanks to Ministry of New and Renewable Energy for hosting us. Your question is quite broad, and I'll try to be very brief for the sake of the time. In particular, that Mr. Das already covered a lot. IREDA is one of the key EIB partners, in fact, in India, in financing solar energy. In fact, EIB right now has total commitments of around 5 billion euros in India, and of which 90% is pure climate action. And of this amount, 1.5 billion euros are for renewable energy. And of this 1.5 billion, it's split about evenly between wind and grid-connected solar. So we do see a lot of potential to continue developing this field. In fact, this area, we allocated fully our second credit line earlier this year for 150 million euros, and was allocated exclusively to solar projects. And the previous credit line of 200 million euros was allocated already some time ago. And we also work with State Bank of India. We have developed 3 large solar PV plants, Fortum Solar, Nagar Solar, and Telangana Solar. So EIB is ready to continue supporting the development of solar industry, both the generation capacity, but also the production, because I think that's becoming, as we heard earlier from previous discussions. And using the occasion, I also would like to stress that EIB promotes 2 values. One is the so-called Team Europe. We really want to promote European values, and we want to bring the competencies that this approach brings, but also we also want to promote international competitive process. And I think India does benefit and can contribute to these processes and these approaches a lot. So it's my great pleasure to be here, and for the sake of time, I will stop here. Thank you.
No, these were the words from the financiers, both Indian and European, and I would now like to move to Mr. Sanjay Sharma from Solar Energy Corporation. They are one of the biggest agencies that tenders out renewable energy projects and have been involved in capacity addition great deal. From you, Mr. Sharma, I would like to know what are the trends that you are seeing as far as demand side is concerned. There is the rooftop solar for CN, and especially in the CNI segment. There is floating solar, and then there is grid-connected solar as well. So where do you see the demand trends coming from, and the demand for higher efficient panels and other gear?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Am I audible? Yes. So regarding this demand, during pandemic, we were the only agency who carried out the bids and came out with the reverse auctions, and that incident has also been captured by UN Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres and appreciated that thing. But the problem is, because of the COVID, the demand has gone down by the states, because the manufacturing and other things were not in position, factories were not running. So we were not able to sell out our already concluded bids. So during that period, we have accumulated approximately 20 gigawatts of capacities which we were not able to sell out to the states, because our major off-takers are states only, state discoms. So right now the demand is catching up. Still we are struggling with the inventory of say 6,000 megawatt or so in solar sector. So regarding that demand in C&I sector, demand for rooftop and demand for floating solar, for rooftop sector we have signed MOU with Ministry of Home Affairs, wherein other paramilitary forces are ready to set up rooftop plants in their premises. So SECI is doing that, and within a period of say 10-15 days, we will be coming out with a tender of 50 to 60 megawatt or so. We are just collating the demand. And now floating solar, as everybody is aware that India is very, very cost sensitive buyers. India has very cost sensitive wires. So floating solar, it is having slightly more tariff. So that we are not very sure that only we are coming out with our own tender in Chhattisgarh state, wherein the state has ready to buy, and with the tariff of approximately 4 rupees or so. So 100 megawatt that we are doing. So these are the demands.
Coming to the manufacturers who are also there on the panel, I would first like to ask a question to Mr. Russo from the NL Green Power, and he's setting up the largest solar panel manufacturing facility. So just briefly, if you could first tell us why is it called 3 Sun Gigafactory, and then maybe we could move on to know your views on how India and EU can collaborate in manufacturing.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. 3 Sun was actually born in 2010. So the name comes from the fact that originally it was a partnership among 3 entities. Sharp from Japan, who was providing the technology, Enel that was acting as a utility and granting market access for the product, and there was ST Microelectronics, a company active in semiconductor industry, which is indeed very close to the solar one. Today, the company started leveraging a different technology, which was thin film. Then in 2018, we switched to heterojunction technology, which proved to be much more promising in terms of efficiency. Today, 3 Sun is a company fully owned by Enel, by the Enel Group. And we just made a major investment of 600 million euro that will bring us to be the biggest established cell and module factory in Europe by 2024. What is that we need to do? I think we, from the business side, as already mentioned by the previous speakers, we need to continue investing heavily on the innovation, on the R&D part. Scale is important, indeed, is fundamental, but I think it's fundamental also to try to change the rules of the game, to try to differentiate not only by reducing cost, which is vital, of course, but also by delivering a product that can be much more competitive and can increase the amount of power we can generate per unit square meter. Financing. I think this is a topic that is fundamental. I totally agree also with what Mr. Barr for the International Energy Agency said, that policy, I mean, what we see today in China has been created in 10 years, leveraging a support that is bigger than 100 billion euro. What's happening today in US, thanks to the introduction of the Inflation Reduction Act, is basically support that is quantified in the order of 14 euro cents per watt. That means basically a support that will be above 30 billion US dollars. In Europe, I think we have today some tools that are available. In 3 Sun, we are leveraging a support from the Innovation Fund that is in the order of 83 million euro. Additional 100 million euro will come from the Italian government, so grants are there. But the message I would like to share is that this is not enough. I mean, if we really believe that decarbonization is a key leverage to really grant energy independence, we need to move much faster. We need to also increase the scale of the support that we want to provide. 3 Sun will have 3 gigawatt of production capacity installed by 2024. It's a first step, significant one, but when compared to the numbers that have been said by the Commissioner before, we want to basically have 600 gigawatt of installed capacity in Europe by 2030. We can see that the acceleration is absolutely a must. Thank you.
So, as you mentioned, that both the quality and the scale is important, and how we need to move fast because of the decarbonization commitments. We also have Mr. Bicker from REC, and he's another big manufacturer. And since there has been a lot of talk during the course of previous panels as well on diversification of the supply chain. So as a solar manufacturer, have you been able to attempt at diversification of the supply chain, and how are you looking at the Indian market as far as these efforts are concerned?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's a very good question too. I mean, diversification of the supply chain is a hot topic in the industry, and well, as said, right, I'm representing REC here, and I will give you a little bit of a manufacturer's perspective on it. But REC today is one of the very few remaining sizable non-Chinese solar and cell manufacturer. We have about 2 gigawatts of production capacity. Most of that is heterojunction, which was quoted here multiple times now, the upcoming future technology. We've been the first one to industrialize that, and we actually have significant capacity of that up and running. We are also 100% owned subsidy of Reliance Industry here in India. So we're very exposed to what's going on here in India and deeply involved. And today we have manufacturing sites in Singapore and in Norway. But together with our new owner, we have very, very active projects which are in execution to bring massive capacity in heterojunction technology, and that's covering the whole supply chain. So basically going from quartz to power. And I think that's a very important point, because if you look at the solar supply chain today, you only will be independent, and as everybody knows, there's a big dependency today on one single country. You only will be independent if you cover the whole supply chain. If you miss one component, you cannot make a module. As long as you are missing one component, you're not independent. And there's an opportunity here, right? And but if you look at the industry today, right, it's dominated by Chinese manufacturers. You're looking at a capacity of 200 gigawatt plus of module manufacturing in China, and that is combined with a fully integrated supply chain, or a fully aligned supply chain. That supply chain is 100% cost optimized. So competing against this Chinese giant in solar manufacturing is not easy, and the industry needs help to do so. And I think what India is doing here at the moment, the combination of production-linked incentive with market protection, is the right way to go, because a newly emerging international solar industry cannot from day one on compete head-on with Chinese manufacturers. There needs to be a transition time where we will need protection. And I believe the opportunity here between Europe, the European Union, and India is massive. There is an opportunity to share the burden to build that supply chain between the two regions. The two regions can actually do this together. To do this, they need to be aligned on how they support the industries, and they also need to be aligned on how they protect the industry from Chinese competition as it is today. As long as that is manageable, and as long as, while the two regions are doing that, they don't have barriers between each other, I think the opportunity is just huge, and the burden can be shared between the regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Sojay Ghosh from First Solar, your company has been around in India for some time. And we heard from the Secretary MNRE that there's an emphasis by the government to phase out old panels and get newer technologies, newer panels, more efficient panels. So from that perspective, how massive this task would be, and the opportunities it throws open for newer technology, what do you think would be the task be?
Yeah, so good afternoon, and thank you for having us on the panel. First Solar's the only company in the solar module Super League with a completely different technology. We make thin film modules. And we've been in the industry for more than 2 decades, holding our own against the massive capacities which have been created in China, simply because our supply chain doesn't depend on the China-based supply chain. And in response to the Indian government's call for self-reliance and in the PV sector, we invested close to $700 million to build a fully integrated solar manufacturing facility, which is coming up near Chennai. It's in construction, and it'll perhaps be one of the first of the vertically integrated, semiconductor to module production facilities in the country. Our experience of doing, providing an alternate technology on high volume manufacturing has been developed over the last 2 decades of very close collaboration with the EU-based technology companies, right, in the field of vapor transport deposition to laser to conveyor systems. And as we build our factory in India, we see a huge opportunity for the European Union-based companies to collaborate with not just people like us, but other companies who are setting up upstream production facilities with the capital goods, right? And as that ecosystem builds up, we're going to see more and more collaboration between India and the EU in that space. And, that's been our evolution. We hope to go commercial production by October of 2023 with a module which will be Eco-Label certified silver, which is one of the unique features in terms of the sustainability of the supply chain. And as well as we are also building the country's first high volume recycling of the end-of-life module facility, which will be integrated with our factory. So I think, we are already putting in motion a very active collaboration between the EU and manufacturers like us in India, which hopefully will be a template which can be emulated by others.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Our time is up and it says in red. So I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their perspective on the financing, on the manufacturing, and also on the tendering challenges in the market. And over to you, please.
I would like to thank all our panelists and moderator for the enlightening discussion. Now we have reached the end of our session today, so I would quickly want to invite Dr. Seshadri Chari, the distinguished member of Governing Council RIS, for the concluding remark and a vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. We have had a very fruitful and absolutely encouraging session since morning, since the afternoon. I must place on record the greatest appreciation on behalf of RIS, which represents the Ministry of External Affairs. RIS, incidentally, is the only institution which has a multi-sectoral and multi-governmental institutions. The Finance Ministry, the Foreign Ministry, Science and Technology, Commerce, and all ministries are represented in the RIS. And we have been in the forefront of arranging such interactions with a number of countries, including the EU. We all have, of course, gone through the details about the need for an alternative to fossil fuel as a source of energy. It has always remained a priority for a number of economies, the developed economies, the developing economies, and especially when it comes to EU, almost 40% of its natural gas requirements are from one country, which is Russia. But this dependence is even very uneven if you take into consideration the factor that this bloc itself is more dependent. Some countries are more dependent on Russia than other countries. And we have also discussed about how the disruption in supply chain was caused by mainly two factors, the pandemic and the crisis, Russia-Ukraine crisis. And we have also discussed how solar energy is the most important green energy that we all know for centuries, in fact, and we need not stress the importance of solar energy anymore. We have also gone through India's initiatives. In November 2021 at the COP26 summit, the Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi presented what he called at that time the 5 nectar elements, that is the Panchamrit, on the occasion of global brainstorming on climate change. So we all know how India has committed to non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. As of March 22, it is around 157 gigawatt. The commitment is also to meet 50% of India's energy requirements from renewable energy by 2030. Currently, it is 25%. The next commitment, of course, is to reduce 1 billion tons of carbon emission from now till 2030. Reduce the carbon intensity of India's economy by less than 45% and achieve the target of net zero by 2070. Of course, at COP26, India was also instrumental in launching the Global Green Grid Initiative. One Sun, One World, One Grid. OSWOG it is called. One Sun, One World, One Grid. So this is the ultimate goal to which India and European Union could probably work together, considering the challenges that many of our speakers in the two brainstorming sessions have mentioned. These challenges, of course, are not going to be very easy and not very easy to resolve, but no challenge is unsurmountable if both India and EU can work together on a number of initiatives that India has also started, and some of the measures that the European Union has also put in place, like the European Green Deal. The bilateral cooperation also includes a number of other areas, such as the rooftop initiative, which many number of speakers have pointed out. And EU and India are also part of the global initiative called Mission Innovation to boost investment in clean energy research and innovation. Under this plan, there is a program to hold the 8th ministerial initiative next year. In 2023, we will be holding the ministerial initiative, and we have so far almost 22 member countries of the EU have submitted their papers and proposals, and also programs that they are going to take. Of course, all this will be collectively brought under the EU mission. There are other issues which the Ministry of External Affairs, along with other relevant ministries, are considering. One of the initiatives that can help take forward this collaborative effort in solar and other areas is to set up a bilateral trade and technology council. That process is undergoing, and once India and EU are able to finalize the FTA, this process will also gain strength. Another idea is, of course, to develop a pipeline of joint solar projects under the Bilateral Connectivity Partnership Agreement. I'm not going into the details of the agreement, which we all have known since 2016. And we are also working on the role of regional and multilateral development financial institutions in mitigating risks and boosting investment in solar sector. So these are some of the ideas that India and European Union are jointly working in the current process. And this entire process of diversification of global supply chain, which we all underwent since afternoon, is part of the collective effort that India and European Union are jointly undertaking to face the challenges that we are facing. The pandemic and the current crisis, Russia-Ukraine crisis, has brought all of us together. As it was said, if not love, let calamity toss her into my bosom. I think it's the calamity which has brought us all to this kind of a situation. We hope India and European Union would be able to cooperate further, even if there is no other calamity. Thank you, all of you, and thanks especially to Her Excellency Ms. Kadri Simson, the Minister for Renewable Energy, Mr. Bhagwanth Khuba. There was a special address by Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General of International Solar Alliance, and all other participants who have traveled far and wide to make this conference a great success. We will all be meeting very soon for the next phase of all these ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. With this, we come to the end of our session for the day. I would like to thank our audience for joining us today. High tea has been organized for all our participants outside, so please help yourselves. I would also like to remind our participants about the feedback forms, which they can fill using the QR code on the 10 cards on their tables. And for those of you who are interested in the B2b networking sessions, those have started right away. So please reach out to the registration desk for further help. Thank you and have a nice day.